Hi, my name is Ella Otomewo, and in the most simple terms, I'm a poet, but I'm also an actor, performer, and workshop facilitator. I graduated with a first class degree in English and drama from the University of Salford 4 years ago, and I've been working as a freelance poet ever since. Some projects that I've really enjoyed working on over the past year has been resident writer at Festival of Libraries here in Manchester, and a project called Dial with Art with Heart, where artists were linked up with elderly people around the city to share stories and build connections before developing our own creative responses to the experience. I've also worked on a young identity community project with the Holland School in Accrington, running a poetry after school club. So I believe that Black history is just history and should be treated as such. I do see the value in a Black History Month because I think that the history that is currently taught and celebrated in Britain is still incredibly narrow, and so a lot of history is forgotten. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie calls this the danger of a single story. But Black History Month gives us a dedicated time to reflect on that, to shine a light on the past that is not as widely known. I'm aware that singling out 1 month a year gives people, institutions, government, and society as a whole an excuse to ignore Black history for the rest of the year. And so I like to think of Black History Month as a step towards a future where we don't need it, where we broaden our understanding of the past, question whose version of history is remembered and celebrated and why. I'm now going to read some poems that I feel fit with the themes of Black History Month and family and storytelling, and the first one is called Zigzag. My favourite book to read when I was young was called A is for Africa. Each letter of the alphabet had a page, from colon up to queen to masquerade, and so before I'd go to sleep, I'd leave my bed and silently sneak to the bookshelf. I wanted to see pictures of children who looked like me, and I wanted to know more about my family and where they were from. Reading G is for Grandmother made me think of my own, of her deep chuckle and soft gaze and all of the days we spent in the overgrown garden under her watch. The last page showed a zigzag lane with lush green trees on either side and a child balancing a basket on their head. I practiced in my bedroom with a bucket from the beach, and I wobbled as I walked, as I overthought each step, but I got there. When we think about walking down uncharted paths, or of trying something new before we understand the past, we forget about those who have gone before us. And like a chorus of encouragement, our ancestors want us to succeed, want us to read about them, learn from them, build upon what they left us, and follow our path, be it straight or zigzag, red brick or red dust. The next poem is called Feather to Feather. It's written from the perspective of a feather of a ceremonial headdress worn at a Nigerian funeral to a feather that is about to be plucked from a chicken. I am only worn on sacred days. On that sacred day, I was secured to a sorrowful head with an aged leather ribbon. I remember the sun tickling through me, warming my spine. Each of my siblings was paced above yet more sombre brows, carried above the procession of mourners. That is when I saw you, vivacious and soft against your chicken's flesh. I wished to turn, to gaze at you and your siblings in flight just once more, before I was shipped inside by the head. I have since tried not to think of feathers in flight. The thought leaves me bereft. I try to be content with the headdress arrangement. Although sometimes, when a head is quickly bowed in prayer, I feel the rush of wind through my bristles and I imagine that I am taking flight, that I am wedged in amongst other living feathers and that I am free. This next poem was written for a project called Disarm Hate. Give a man a gun and he'll learn to shoot and kill. Call it self-defense and swear he'd never felt the thrill of clasping steel shaped like life and death, wielding in his hands the cold weight of filthy power as he strolls through stolen lands. Give a man a gun and he's desensitized to terror, until it sometimes looks like pleasure. And then the pleasure looks like terror, like their pleasure looked like terror, like their pleasure made him terrified, like he was terrified. It was the pleasure. It must have been. The pleasure that killed them, not us. Not our terror, not our hate, not our fear of the debate that we might tear up and shake with rage and share what we've learned in our numbered days and say, you don't know, while they cry, help me see. And she says, this is how it is, and he says, that wasn't me. You might hold your tongue while they clench their fists, while the anxiety in his stomach's getting harder to resist. She might say, I was raising placards while you learnt to eat and shit. They might say, we had to hide while you shone the light, but I was there ready and waiting for the fight. Give the man a gun. Go on, put it in his hand. Let him draw the line of fire and earn the reprimand. Let him draw the gun. Let him draw the line, then cross it. Call it self-defense and swear he's never felt the thrill of clasping steel shaped like life and death. This next poem is called Neighbourhoods. Whenever I get asked why I don't have a Brummie accent, I explain that my dad's a South East Londoner. And so the root cause of my tongue begins at SE15. More specifically, that my tonsils found a home in Little Lagos on Peckham's Lausanne Road in my grandparents' living room, where I often return, like a child landing softly into tall grass. Generations of Otomewos have filed in against that raspberry velvet paisley wallpaper. They recited their pleasantries and glowing school reports too, against a backdrop of photos of elders' graduations and the tribes back home in fabrics which caress you through the frames at an intimate distance. Whiff of jollof lingered. It wasn't exactly a house of song, but I know that Grandma could recite the Psalms, and a queer grandchild in her Sunday best knew to leave her tongue at the door. The facets of her identity, like unruly curls, braided into compliance, binding together all those tangled roots. This next poem is called Oyinbo. On returning to an unknown motherland, do not expect it to be like returning to your childhood bedroom. You left too long ago for that. You left 2 generations ago. When returning to an unknown motherland, a woman with a prune for a face and an artichoke heart will lean in to tell you that you and your family are home now. The sand beneath your feet is sacred, as are the trees and your skin and your name. Your auntie's auntie's auntie will squeeze out your breath and call you her very own Oyinbo. And the children will laugh and scream Oyinbo at you when you tell them you are going for a stroll around the village. You will think of the word home when you hear the word Oyinbo. When returning to an unknown motherland, the priest will ask for your name. You will answer, but she will say she means your Nigerian name. When she repeats it with approval, you will wonder how your own name could slide off someone else's tongue smoother than it does your own. When returning to an unknown motherland, the same people who call you Oyinbo will tell you that you have returned to the motherland. Around the table, eating with your family, the power will cut out, and across the little room in the darkness you will hear your grandmother sigh. Nigeria, how did we ever cope? The winter will be hot and humid, but tempered by afternoon breezes, and the clouds will gather above you while the red dust sits in the cuffs of your white linen trousers. At night, the generators will groan through the house as you sweat under your sheet in sleep. When you return to the unknown motherland, your mother will ask, what is it like to get off a plane in Africa and for once be surrounded by people who look like you? But you will not recognize yourself or your skin. You will reluctantly accept the word Oyinbo. Oyinbo as in European, Oyinbo as in foreigner, as in not African, but you will still call the village home. And finally, when you land in Heathrow Airport 2 weeks later, you'll be followed around the shop by a security guard, and you will call England home too. This poem is called Merfolk. Black families flung from ships by the most ugly rage, torn from home, alone in new ways. Night sky skin meets daylight sea with a crash. I see in blue and black, feel their stories across my back, set into the skin like tree rings. The light gives up when it gets to certain depths. Is sunlight scared of what it might see? Might see the sea in inky reflections of itself, might get distracted by its beauty and forget to kiss the shore when morning comes. Yet those who kiss the shore when morning comes with their last breath have been spat out by the ocean from its terrible depths, or returned to its sibling the sand. I see deep roots on my outstretched hand and hold their nameless deaths in my soft palm. I bet the preacher has a psalm for times like this, when an ancient bounding force like the sea meets the devastating absence of humanity. My last poem is called For Olden Library, and it's a sonnet inspired by the initial reluctance from the council to open its first public library. Ode to a building made by men whose love of books was confined to the Bible and bank book. These men whose hands in silken gloves seized tight to unearned power and the funds to feed the minds of a community. But capitalists never cared for libraries. All the more reason to find unity in shared history and all it carries. How blessed are we to find ourselves within sacred spaces campaigned for by lovers of literature and archive and learning, of stories, art and books to discover, a sonnet for the Holy Trinity, of library, museum and gallery. Thank you.